Hi, my name is Joel Benj. I am the principal and owner of MessageSpecs LLC. We are a messaging and marketing consultancy that works specifically with cybersecurity companies, tech companies, really smart startups, and things like that. And I would like to talk to you about something today, but first I'd like to give you my bona fides. You're probably wondering who's the weirdo with the glasses. My name is Joel. Again, I am a message therapist of sorts. I am a recovering theater nerd and video game tester. Then I accidentally had an opportunity to spend some time in IT. I ended up working in a NOC and a SOC, doing compliance and configuration and all that types of stuff. And then I had an opportunity to work for the government. I spent 7 years at the Department of Homeland Security as the principal cybersecurity communications manager there. And I joined a startup. I'm not even going to get into that story, but all told, I've got about 25 years in cybersecurity, IT, and marketing. And I've seen a lot of where cybersecurity communications can go wrong. That's why I stood up MessageSpecs, and I'd like to share just a little bit of an insight today about where I think we're all going wrong and what we can do about it. So the first thing is really just the depth. Technical people tend to go very deep with their communications, especially when you have an organization that's led by a founder or a developer, and they are just trying to put as much information in front of their audience as they can. Sometimes these tech developers think that they can just put studies and white papers in front of their audience, and they're just going to naturally come to the conclusion that I come to. That's not always the case. On the other hand, you've got marketing agencies who are phenomenal. They make things look really good, but oftentimes they're not quite grokking or getting the subject matter. So again, creatives focus sometimes on sparkle over substance. If they're doing something that looks really cool but doesn't quite relate or resonate with the subject matter or the audience, it can get lost. And I'd like to think that this is because both often skip messaging basics, right? So you'll have a marketing company that they'll do branding and they'll do maybe a messaging exercise, and you'll get 4 or 5 months into the process, and then the developers and the product people are still changing their mind and they're still trying to decide, well, we don't really want to say it that way. We don't want to say it this way. And you lose a lot of opportunity. You lose a lot of progress in that process. So what I would say is I would like to make a little bit of a modest proposal today about how we can overcome all this stuff. Just cut to the chase and make sure that we just put out some really good communications. And that is to use what I would call a messaging framework. This is what I'm going to introduce to you. It's not anything revolutionary. I'm going to show you a pyramid. I've borrowed it from Maslow's hierarchy. He borrowed it from the Blackfeet Native American tribe. But the way I'm applying it is something that I think we really need in cybersecurity communications. The challenge that I find is that most companies really have this really well done. They've got the product features, they've got the technical specs, they've got the capabilities, they've got white papers and studies, and they've got how it works down really, really well. And quite often, again, as I said, these technical communicators are trying to just put that in front of the buyer. And if the buyer's not in a receptive place, or they're not quite in the buyer's journey to receive that information, sometimes it flies over their head. Sometimes it's just too much for them to input. They've got competing needs, and so they just don't quite have the time for all of that data down here. Where am I? There I am. All that data down here at the bottom of the pyramid. Quite often they've got proof points. They have, 85% reduction of whatsoever, or they've got 100,000 K of this, or they've got, a bunch of numbers. They've got testimonials. Sometimes they've got case studies. Those are all fantastic, but you have to then put those in context. One of the ways that you can put those in context is by abstracting those and bringing them up one more layer and talking about pillar mantras. Now, a pillar mantra is a concept. A lot of people would say we want to have pillar messages. Pillar messages to me feel kind of like a checklist or a bullet list. A pillar mantra is just something that you put in your messaging and your content that you say all the time. For me, one of mine, if you ever hung out with me, had a beer, it's complex does not need to be confusing, right? And so this is a way of just saying the same thing over and over again, maybe in a couple slightly different ways as appropriate to the channel. But a pillar mantra is something formalized that you write down that everybody understands and everybody just uses over and over and over again. From up here, we've got some typical messaging and marketing things. You've got your brand value proposition, but Putting together a good brand value proposition from the audience's perspective is harder than you might think, and that takes a little bit of time. Then you've got your brand story, then you've got your idea, your big idea. Now, this framework that I'm showing you, this pyramid, the purpose of this is to actually write it down, but not just make it a document, not just make it something that you write and you put on the shelf, people read once when they onboard. It's to make it living. It's to actually create a framework that can grow and flex and scale and be applied to multiple different types of products. The framework is structured from a high density information, low emotion to a low density information, high emotion structure, right? So that's why you need to then select, when you're putting together a framework, what am I going to include and what's appropriate for where the buyer is in their journey. So from an ad or a landing page, I'm going to want to hit those to people who really may not know who I am, may not know the brand. They don't really need that technical information down at the bottom. What they need is the big idea, what's the story, and what's the brand value? What are they going to get out of this relationship that we're developing? And so then having that framework and saying every time we put together an ad or a landing page, these are the 4 or 5 story points, these are the messages we want to include. Formalizing that, making sure everybody is on the same page, making sure they're included. So from that ad and from that landing page, they're going to want to download something like a data sheet. So from a data sheet perspective, you can start to move a little bit further down that pyramid. You're going to want to include those product features. You may not want to include every single technical detail. That'll overwhelm the person who's downloading that 1-pager or that 2-pager. And so then you would say, well, what else do I include? I include proof points, and I go back to my pillar mantras. I always want to include those pillar mantras in every piece of content that I put out there once people get out past that first step. If I want them to download a white paper, 100% I want to include every product feature, every technical detail. Give me all the data. Give me that great nerdy stuff that you want to include, right? Because likely once somebody is downloading something of that depth, they're going to have moved through that process with you, right? They've gone from coffee to dinner to coming home and having a drink, right? But don't forget to include those brand values, right? So from a white paper can sometimes come off as a little bit antiseptic, a little bit academic. If you can include a little bit of proof point, a little bit of brand value in your white paper, it's going to go a lot further than just an academic paper. And then again, don't forget those pillar mantras. The pillar mantras should show up everywhere. You should figure out what your 4 or 5, maybe 6 max pillar mantras work for your company and your brand, and make sure that they just show up no matter what you're doing. So I hope this was helpful to you. This is this is a little bit of what we do at MessageSpecs, and part of what we do is help you on this journey. We have workshops, we have audits, we help you develop these frameworks, develop the playbook so that your internal team and your marketing and your PR and your external consultants can also be all on the same page. So I would invite you to join me. Send me an email, joel@messagespecs.com. Check us out, and I look forward to seeing how you can sharpen and bring some focus to your messaging and words. Awesome. Have a good day.